everyone, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree, or I guess I should say, or actually, no, they have more of his classic scream in there. I can't do it. But anyways, with me is Tarek Fayumi with Movies with Tarek. We just saw Godzilla -1, a movie that they didn't give us screeners for, or screenings. If you guys don't know what a screener is, it's basically a link to a movie you see when you get home. But, having said that, I mean, we could just jump right into what we thought of the movie. Do you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
You can go first. I'm still processing.
Alright, well, I have to say, this is a Godzilla movie that I've wanted to see for a long time. Because one thing I say a lot about Godzilla movies is, it's not like the first one. And the first one was a smart film. The first one was a movie about, it was a metaphor for, the bomb that was dropped on Japan for Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And it was and Godzilla was a creation of that. And he was basically a punishment for our bloodlust for war. And this movie I think it was a prequel to the original one, because this was a film where Godzilla was terrifying, and he killed people mercilessly, and he wasn't like the American version of the Godzilla where,
God, he wasn't.
Yeah, where he isn't just a good guy who's fighting all the bad monsters to save everyone. This is a mean Godzilla who will kill people, and so frankly, this is sort of the Godzilla I've always wanted to see. I wanted to see a Godzilla film that had to say more than just destroy buildings, fight other monsters. This was a film that was about nuclear war and war itself.
And going forward, what I loved about this film was there was like a moment where it's like, even how we're talking about like its era. I like how it's in that post-war era for Godzilla, because it's like, okay, it's like that approach where like a war is just wrapped up, and then later Godzilla is their new enemy after that, something in an era that they're not prepared for. And I agree with you, this is an extremely mean Godzilla, and we don't wait. Godzilla does not wait in this one. He comes right out there. And when I look back at my previous Godzilla experiences, this was probably the most faithful and realistic Godzilla film I've ever seen. However, I will say, though, going forward, I find I have more appreciation for this, because a foundation of understanding comes in with the mayhem of Godzilla, rather than just relying on mayhem to be a selling point. Like, it cares about storyline, it cares about structure, it cares about its era, it cares about its theoretics, its science, its logistics of what it may take to defeat Godzilla in a time frame where we don't have the technological advancements. And I just felt it's one of those things where it's like a lair over a war that just ended, but Godzilla is the new beast after the war.
Yeah. Well, he's the continuation of the war after the war, because I think the whole metaphor is, yes, World War II just ended, but after after Oppenheimer's bomb was dropped.
Oh, I love that comparison.
Then, we really started the real war, which is the nuclear war, which is the one where we're gonna kill all of each other. And there was some political stuff in there too. They were talking about how the Japanese military isn't reliant on killing Godzilla, and people have to rely on their own private strengths in order to take him down. And that was a great element of the film. The movie was basically damnation on war and the act of war itself. Although, like, in the end, it was warfare that killed the monster, but only briefly.
And now that you said that, like countries relying on their own resource, that just kind of reminded me, because there's that setup where in the time frame, each country is still figuring out what to do. It's like letting the damage and seeing what Godzilla can do to help them have an idea of what his weakness may be. But in this one, time is of the essence for that factor. Like, there's little to no time to figure it out.
They have to kill him right away because he's just gonna come back and destroy all of now he wasn't in Tokyo in this one. He didn't reach there yet, right?
Not really. I mean, it kind of just one where I feel like it kind of kept it kept resorting back to that setting around those countries like the Tokyo and well further in. I mean, they had some times where I remember where the years were listed and like of the war and whatnot. Well, that was to give it a background, but it was a clearer background and setting. And I just feel that with Godzilla -1, this is probably a storyline that has that's waited too long to come out of its shell, and it's finally here. Kind of. Whereas each Godzilla we've had, I mean, still love some of the classical ones like Godzilla 2000, but I really despise. I'm sorry. If anyone's gonna not like me for this, that's okay. I really despised a Roland Emmerich Godzilla.
Well, that one was terrible, and that was kind of taken. Now that was a little after Jurassic Park, and I think they kind of were inspired by that movie's visual effects, and they tried to copy Godzilla based on the dinosaurs of that movie instead of Godzilla himself, and it didn't quite work. The design of Godzilla in here, now this movie I believe was made for about like $15 million or something like that.
And also a trivia was the movie's intended look was not revealed to the public until the Blu-ray release in 2009. So that just shows, when you look at that film, how they were already having some issues trying to figure out how to market that thing.
For the Roland Emmerich film?
Yes.
Yeah, well that one, I mean, that was made at a time when the disaster movies were real popular, and they were popular in the 90s market, and that was America capitalizing on that. Now, of course, Godzilla is a capitalization of the disaster movie in the first place, but that one didn't work because it didn't really have a single original idea.
No.
And this film works because it's not just about the monster killing people, but it's about the people killing people and the results of their actions.
And Steven Spielberg even tried to talk Roland Emmerich out of directing that, but of course I am amazed how someone like Roland Emmerich did not take the advice of Spielberg. It's like, this is Spielberg telling you this, but I think Roland had in his mind, oh, I'm going to be a Spielberg someday.
Well, what did Spielberg tell him?
According to IMDb, for my research, it says Steven Spielberg tried to talk Emmerich. Steven Spielberg tried to talk Emmerich out of making the film, considering it a silly idea for Hollywood to try and remake Godzilla. So that shows that people wanted to respect Godzilla's nostalgia back then. But look, they went above and beyond trying to respect the nostalgia. They already had this 1998 Godzilla. They had Godzilla 2000. Then after that, we've had our Godzilla of Bryan Cranston. We've had that Shin Godzilla, which I kind of enjoyed Shin Godzilla kind of thing, even though it was a little quirky in a way. But then we had Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then we have Godzilla versus Kong, and now we have this one. But this one is the most, because I didn't really have many of my experiences with a Godzilla movie in the theater. It was mostly on VHS or DVD. But this one is probably the most surreal Godzilla experience because the faithfulness in the graphics of how the monster looks in Godzilla -1 is one that honestly looks like is purely a monster where the wrath is just waiting to happen. And it happened sooner than I had anticipated. So I'm like, okay. But then I liked how it has its points of pausing, and it doesn't just rely on destroy.
Yeah. Well, the movie did start off with a big destruction sequence where Godzilla wasn't as big as he usually is. He starts out, kind of like a mini Godzilla, but he's still a big motherfucker. And
oh, hell yes.
And in the beginning of the film, we have our main character, who is Koichi, and please help me. Please forgive me if I'm getting his name wrong. Shikishima.
Yes.
Shikishima.
That's the main person of importance. I probably am only going to remember that character's name because they keep jumping back to him, and he's like the main center of this person. It's almost like the one where it's like the center of who's probably the one to come face to face to put an end to the destruction.
Well, he was the protagonist of the film, obviously, but like his general motivation was in the beginning was that he was supposed to get on a 50 cal gun and shoot Godzilla dead, but he was afraid to get. Yeah, he paused and he was afraid to do it. And I think the reason was because he knew that gun wouldn't do anything.
And it wouldn't. And that's the point. Like, what you will realize, and for those who have seen this movie and some who have not seen this movie, and you probably already know it, but guns and ammunition is not something that can defeat Godzilla. This one, and I feel like in a way, my description is almost like I'm talking like someone in a COVID pandemic, but I'm not. I'm talking about a Godzilla movie. But what I mean is it's all about, in a way, of how to defeat Godzilla. It's science. Just like how they would tell you in COVID, we're using science to help us figure out this pandemic. In Godzilla, they are using science to figure out where his weaknesses are. And with that, there's points in the film where they put it together. But like I said, it's one of those things where it's like we gotta do this, despite how much impact it can have. Because they're
well, the funny thing is with the science is, if you've seen the original film, one of the main characters, he's this scientist, obviously, and his idea to kill Godzilla is to poison the water supply. Yes. But by poisoning the water supply, he poisons all the life that's in that water.
Yes.
And it plays with this beautiful tune that is very reminiscent and sad of basically all the life that's been lost in the war. And that's sort of what they did with that one. With this one, they decide to, well, I don't want to, should I give it away? It's not a big spoiler.
Let's just say, let's try and think how we could think where we're not giving it away. In a way to describe it, let's just say, think about where it's like, I'm trying to think of a movie I could put it into as an example, or movie examples. Now, think about the climax. If any of you have seen this movie, and if you haven't, that's fine, but definitely watch it. Think about Mel Gibson's Apocalypto, how there are traps in like the climax. Think about a giant one being placed for Godzilla, like at one unexpected moment kind of thing. Well, it may be expected, but you may find it unexpected. But what I mean is, like traps are already there's something that's gonna be set in place.
Yeah, they do. The thing is, there isn't. There's some political commentary to that trap that they set for him. You know, basically, we are endangering the water species that are around us, and we are taking away more life as we're trying to save it. But it's just a continuous circle of war, and that's what Godzilla has always been about.
And when you say that, and we were talking about this briefly earlier, but how they're like endangering the stuff with the water. Well, I'm thinking, well, what if later on it's like, and of course there's more monsters in the later Godzillas, but it's like they might as well continue their defense if more monsters emerge later if they continue this.
Sure, they could do that, but I mean, let's go back a little bit to this film and the characters. Now,
the character development.
Yeah, the movie works because the characters work so well in it, you know?
Yeah, and we don't really see that kind of character development in many of the previous ones. But this one, I like how it's an era where just the world is in chaos. It's a world where the politics are corrupt. It's a world where we live in a time where things were done much differently. And when Godzilla comes, everything that's already shattered gets shattered even more. And that's kind of, I love how it's like Godzilla is like the force of nature that like that's part of the reality. But ultimately, everyone has to learn, well, Shikishima, or however his name sounds, the main character has to figure out what's his gut going to tell him to put an end to what he feels, to what he didn't stop the first time.
Yeah. Well, Shikishima, he was a kamikaze pilot originally, and there's a great scene where he has visited a town that has been air raided. Now, is it by the U.S. it's been air raided by, or I'm not sure.
They don't really. I don't recall them going to much specific. It's kind of where it almost seemed like it was like a process where it's like, oh, been to country kind of thing.
Well, regardless of the fact that basically this guy is called a coward towards this woman who lost her parents inside this whole horrible air raid, and he was a kamikaze pilot who didn't finish the job. He didn't go and kill himself for honor of his country, but there is a great moment in the beginning where he's talking to another character, and he's saying to him, like, what's the point in killing yourself if it's for nothing?
Exactly.
And
he even says, if I wrote you certain things, you wouldn't have come back, kind of thing. Like, he knows that his hatred may be his ally as well, kind of thing.
His hatred for the monster?
Yes.
Okay. Well, and that's sort of the motivating thing for Shikishima. God, we're fucking up his name bad here.
However it's pronounced,
yeah.
I'm sure we're going to hear different.
Yeah. Oh, the comment section, I'm sure, will be very productive about that. But Shikishima is a guy who basically his squad was killed by Godzilla. His life was taken from him, and he had no hope left. And the only thing that would give him hope and give him a reason to live is to take this monster down. And he is a great character to follow because he is sort of he's a representation of the fallout from this war. And, basically the lives that were lost and how someone can make a difference even if it's so little. And his sacrifice, if he tries to give one in the movie, no spoilers, is one that really speaks volumes to what people had to go through during World War II and the sacrifices that they had to make. And this is a film that's not about monsters killing people and all that, but about the monsters that we create. And that's why I liked this film. It was much more representative of that. It wasn't just
film full of CGI.
A film. Well, there was a lot of CGI, but it was a film that had a lot of heart to it and a lot of consequences in it.
And it also cared about the storyline as well. It had a bigger emphasis on it had an emphasis on why things are happening. It had an emphasis on, basically with the main character, going forward. I felt that there was like a sense of connection towards how it's like how there's like life challenges, especially in an era that's a war era and a war zone, but how at the same time, when you add this additional layer, like how much more how much more one's gut has to tolerate, like despite the damage it causes. But at the same time, this Godzilla film, I felt, is one that'll make its fan base, and for those who really take Godzilla seriously. I'm not just talking about like Godzilla from like the previous films. I'm talking about from the way past. If you love Godzilla all the way back from 1954, which is today my favorite Godzilla, with this one, then honestly, I honor you, because if you love Godzilla 1954, then Godzilla -1, you are watching the Godzillas that are faithful in their representation of the world in which they were created.
Well, Godzilla was about nuclear weapons and destruction, and how we end up just continuing a continuous cycle of war. Like they said, your war isn't over, and war didn't end for these guys.
And even going back, like from, as I said, in 1954, like to do even when they were making stuff for this film. The one thing that gets to me so much, I'm thinking, wow, our technology, and they used it right into this time. For back in the 1954 setting, the roars were done by rubbing a coarse, resin-coated leather glove up and down a string of a contrabass, which was a double bass, and then it was reverberated at the recorded sound. And also, the downside was stop motion was not accepted for this film because of its lengthy amount of time. However, I still almost feel, even though they say there's no stop motion, that 1954 one still looks like there's that in there, but I could tell how back then they really took that seriously, and I feel they do that with this one as well. They take this one very seriously, like pacing it out, that is.
They take the material seriously and the themes seriously. It doesn't just feel like it doesn't feel like Godzilla versus King Kong.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, but I was not sold on Godzilla vs. Kong.
I wasn't even sold on the original Godzilla, not the original Godzilla film, but the recent remake that they had, the one where Bryan Cranston's yeah, the one where Bryan Cranston's the best character and they kill him off within like the first few minutes of the movie.
And you're just like, what's going on?
Yeah, the sound can't hear you, but. You had the main character in that film who also was taking care of a woman and a baby because her parents were taken from the war, and she just kind of dropped this baby off in his arms and gave him something, because that's what happened to people back then. They had no homes. Everything was taken from them.
They had no homes. Everything was taken for them. Then it was just like you come to a point where it's like where's Godzilla's next location in this movie?
Well, it wasn't just about Godzilla destroying the thing, but you see how it affects the lives of the people that he destroys. And that's what makes the movie work. It's not going to be a destruction fest. And look, if you want to get into the destruction and all that stuff, it's there. There's even a great callback to the original Godzilla song that they kick up halfway through the movie that I really enjoyed hearing. And boy, when it gets into the mayhem that Godzilla does, it's
when you talk about Godzilla,
it's really gripping.
When you talk about mayhem, man, you make me want to find a way to revisit Destroy All Monsters Melee Mayhem to a way. That's how I'm putting it, Melee Mayhem.
See, that's all the silly Godzilla stuff. That's the video game Godzilla.
But that's what I mean, though. Like, I find that the video game Godzilla more faithful in a way than the ridiculous ones like the Bryan Cranston one in 1998. When I mean more worth it in a Godzilla mindset.
Well, how have the Japanese depicted Godzilla after the first one throughout the years? Because I remember when I was a kid, I loved having the Godzilla toys, but to me it was just a big toy to smash against other toys. And that's kind of how deep Godzilla got. It wasn't like this film where it was about people who are starving and dying from World War II, and this Godzilla thing just brings the war on to an even greater degree, killing more people. This was, just fun, silly stuff for kids with Godzilla. How are the other Japanese films compared to this?
I'm going to say, and now when I look back at Godzilla 2000, don't get me wrong, Godzilla 2000 still slightly silly, but it still keeps its nostalgia because even though the film looks silly in like its form of like its technology, that's because it was made like still within the people involved with that. And I still feel, even though there's moments of those being overrated or cheesy, those I still think take it seriously, because Godzilla was something that originated like in a whole different world from the US. So I feel its originality is within, like, when it's in an era like Japan or somewhere in Asia or a different side of the world, especially when even I think, though, the only issue you have with something like later on, like some of the films when they try to make like multiple Godzillas, even before the prime ones we talked about, I think the only issue they had a little bit was they were a little ahead of their time, kind of thing.
Were they?
Well, Godzilla 2000 is still very fun, but like some people are like, oh, this looks blurry, or oh, this looks kind of faded. I'm thinking it's because it's a little ahead of its time, but I mean, also that was 1999, and right the year after, like, you know.
Are you talking about the Roland Emmerich one?
The one that came right after. They made one in 99 called Godzilla 2000.
Okay, and that was a Japanese one?
Okay. I don't think it intended at first to get like a U.S. release, but then it did, of course, because it's Godzilla, and the popularity kind of went up again.
Right.
So I think, though, that one, I think it still has its key points to being what Godzilla should be, because it's like, you know, like the originality just feels there more, especially when it's made like in a Japan setting.
Well, it feels like the Japanese, they do a little more with Godzilla than the Americans do. Because if we look at the recent American Godzilla films, I couldn't remember most of those characters to spit at them.
Character development in the American Godzillas have always been lacking, kind of thing. There's never been really anything that's memorable in most of them.
Well, I feel like the Americans forget the point of Godzilla. The point of Godzilla isn't that he's
It's all about commercialism for the American ones in a way.
Well, Godzilla is commercialism in the first place.
The title itself is commercialism.
Yeah, well, and the title of this one is kind of confusing, but
I feel like the -1 thing, I feel, even though this is probably not its meaning, but -1, I'm thinking, you know, that's almost like a better way of saying disregard all those other ones that you've wasted your time with and think about this one.
Yeah, this one is a little bit like a soft reboot. This one takes place before the first Godzilla, and this is about Godzilla's first reign of destruction and how the first group of people sort of learn to take him down, even so temporarily. And I mean, there's probably plot holes with this one compared to the original. Like, how did nobody else hear about Godzilla until, you know,
I was like that.
The events of the first film happened, the 1954 film. Like, how do they not know about the events of this film happening? But, you know, that's something that's more of a nitpick.
And also, nowadays, like, I mean, you can find the original Godzilla. I mean, I have that collection, that Criterion thing. I feel, if you really want, if you're a fanatic, and if you have it, awesome. If you don't, no big deal. But if you're able to get that box set of the original Godzilla's and Criterion, yes, it's expensive as hell, but you're going to get your pure nostalgia with all the additional Godzilla facts that you may have known or may not know. It's going to be so much more in depth to why it's all about originating Japan, or why they made the additional steps, went to higher routes when they had no choice back then, or all the efforts they put into it. I feel I could tell the creative sides of the 1954 one still serves a much more rewarding purpose than the American ones we've had.
And this Godzilla, he was made under a smaller budget. I think it was like $15 million, but he looks great.
He does.
And he doesn't look like the Godzilla from the Bryan, we keep calling it the Bryan Cranston film, but
the Breaking Bad graduation film.
Well, I'm trying to figure out the name of the director of that movie.
And I will tell you though,
I think it was Gareth Edwards, if I remember, and he's also the guy who he what's the movie he directed this year? It was about the AI and the little kid, and
it was Gareth Edwards, and then what he directed.
But my point is, like, that Godzilla that he made, he looked like a big fat Godzilla with an eating problem. Like, he didn't have much of a neck. It was like a lot of fat underneath it. And this one's much leaner and much more destructive. And
I feel its limited budget is the key to how they put so much of their quality in how Godzilla looks.
Yeah, and it's funny because they tried to do the Jaws effect with the Gareth Edwards film, and that didn't work so well with Godzilla because he's so big.
We didn't even see much of Godzilla, like, a lot of times, I feel, even in that Gareth Edwards ones. I mean, we do, like, he's there, but it's like they try to hide him too much kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like I'm thinking, okay, so I know Godzilla's there, but why do they keep showing his feet repeatedly so much more than his face?
Because Quentin Tarantino directed it. But, no, the Gareth Edwards Godzilla was a big fat fuck. This Godzilla actually looks like he has some shape to him, and it's much more faithful. Like, this one looks exactly like the Godzillas that I had as a kid.
Now you make me want to buy some of those toys now, or try and find a site where it's like I could buy that stuff, or maybe
eBay,
Amazon, or maybe just all of a sudden come home, get like a Godzilla statue up, and then be like, it's just each time. Now, I don't think I want to have a statue, but I'm just saying how much my nostalgia is there. I mean, my nostalgia is there from that Criterion box set, but now I'm going to want to rewatch that all now after this experience.
Well, this is really a Godzilla film that I've wanted to see for a long time. I wanted to see a Godzilla film that was about the consequences of war, that actually affects people, who die in it, that actually has a message to it, not just fight monsters, kill people. This is a Godzilla film that is respectful to the original and really understands it to a degree that I've not seen in other Godzilla films. And I have to say, this is probably my favorite Godzilla film outside of the original one.
I couldn't agree a few more. It's faithful, it's mesmerizing, it's touching, it's enthralling. It's honestly, there's never been a more realistic Godzilla than Godzilla -1.
Well, I mean, it still looked a little digital, but in terms of how
realistic as in haunting.
And realistic as in consequences. There's actual consequences and stakes to this Godzilla. Anyone can die. And now...
Oh, he already started eating people right in the beginning.
Yeah, like right in the beginning of Godzilla -1. He's in an island and he's just eating people, like, mercilessly. And there's no blood in it. It's bloodless.
And what came to my mind right when Godzilla comes in the opening, as soon as people start going bye-bye right away, it reminded me, I'm thinking, oh boy, this is almost like that Tom Cruise War of the Worlds opening, which that opening, where it's like, you're screwed when some type of monster invade. I felt that way with this Godzilla. Like, okay, hell is already raised. This aftermath, someone better survive to figure out. And of course, our main character survived.
Well, he survived, and they kind of did something real corny in the end where, like, another character survived, and I'm like, how did that character survive when they were absolutely slammed with multiple pieces of debris? Like, she just has, like, a Band-Aid around her eye and an arm strap, and I'm like, no way. She wouldn't be walking for the rest of her life. She would be turned into mincemeat. But the movie does kind of... It does take some liberties in letting certain characters survive, but holy shit, this is the most destructive, vicious Godzilla I have seen in a long time.
I could not agree more. And also, I mean, even how they try to bring in science and physics and figuring out what steps can be done to put an end to what they're about to face. But one thing that you come to realize when you watch this Godzilla, there is no end in sight without logistics for a plan of attack.
Well, you can't just attack him head on. You need to have a strategy. And yeah, the plan to kill him, sure, it's interesting, but there's been a million plans to kill Godzilla before.
He still survives them.
Yeah, and he survives every attack. At the end of every movie, he moves around a little bit.
I feel the official way to officially kill Godzilla, which is never going to happen, it would almost have to be kind of like how kids, and even I still think of this when I was younger, the term where it's like, oh, why don't dinosaurs don't exist more? Oh, they went extinct. That's something that would have to make Godzilla go away. Like, be in a world where everything like that became extinct, which... in its era that they put Godzilla in, we're far from that.
So in other words, there's no way to kill it.
Unless it goes extinct. Like, the world ended, and he went away with it.
Or you could give him some sort of horrible form of disease or bacteria and get him sick.
That's a good point, but then the question is, well, he could still recover from that. That probably now you're making me think Godzilla may be sick, but he could establish herd immunity.
Oh God! Especially with the population, he'll hurt them all out.
Well, think about it. You know, like how they would say now the term herd immunity. No, this is not a COVID topic, but I'm just thinking. Imagine that though. Godzilla getting sick. Kind of like, okay, he's sick. Let's figure it out. Kind of thing. Oh wait, but the problem is with how big he is, he can regain immunity right away.
Well, maybe it depends on the disease you give him.
Oh,
you know,
perfect. Disease you give. Imagine if they're like, guys, I know we said let's social distance, but fuck all that. Like we have to gather.
How can we give Godzilla cancer?
We gotta put smoke in the air. We gotta dump all kinds of toxins that are poisonous and people.
Well, then other people will get it. You just want Godzilla to get it.
Plutonium.
Plutonium, would that work? I don't know.
I think it can either work or fuel his rage. I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but I feel any chemical or anything that hits Godzilla, only thing I've seen is him regain it.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. He's unkillable. And that's what this movie makes very clear. But I think, every movie, they kind of make it clear that Godzilla's unkillable. He's this thing that will never go away.
And the other monsters are kind of unkillable too, and to an extent, it's never Godzilla that's unkillable. I mean, they don't bring the other monsters much. I mean, if we ever go to that one of this one, you know, then they're going to want Godzilla alive, because then it's like, oh, Godzilla has to defeat them, kind of thing.
Well, and that's what I don't want them to do with this movie. I don't want Godzilla to live around so then he can fight other monsters. And then all of a sudden he's a good guy and protects people. Because they did that ending with the Bryan Cranston one. I'm going to call it the Bryan Cranston one. I don't care. Aaron Taylor Johnson was in it and he was fucking boring.
He was. And now there's talks of him always rumored consistently to be the next 007.
No.
I don't think. Well, we're not on it. This is not a 007 movie, but I mean, however, that'd be interesting. But going forward with Godzilla, though, I'm trying to think what would be the ones to revisit right now. Honestly, if we ever had to revisit any, like after this, I'm trying to think of the most faithful
outside the original.
I mean, from this one, I'm gonna say probably the -1. No, not -1. We just saw -1, but I think the 1954 one is what I would revisit. If I could revisit Shin Godzilla, I would. Because even though Shin Godzilla's looked kind of quirky, I could tell that one still tried.
I think it's funny. There was a certain point in the Godzilla films where it was obviously just a guy in a suit. Yeah, although if you see the original film, it's pretty obvious it's just a guy in a costume too.
And then you're thinking, okay, how are they running? Then you'll just think, why are people running and scared from that? It's obviously a guy in a giant costume.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of where a lot of the humor comes from it.
They've made fun of Godzilla now in other movies at this point, kind of thing.
Yeah, Godzilla has become kind of a meme.
No,
they've
made fun of Godzilla and Austin Powers Goldmember. I even remember that. We should run like it is Godzilla. No, it is, but it isn't Godzilla. But we're running anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The director of this movie is also the writer, Takashi Yamazaki. Yeah, he also wrote it. So this is sort of a if you think about it, kind of like a personal piece on Godzilla. Because this movie is just kind of honed in by one man's vision. And of course, he has a team to help him bring that vision to life. But you could tell this is written by a guy who understands the first film and kind of says, well, yeah, all those other monsters exist and all those sequels exist. But what if we look away from that and we just focus on the monster himself?
And the storyline.
Yeah, and we focus on the characters who are affected by Godzilla and also what that original film means. And that's what Godzilla -1 does.
And even though we did not get screenings of this movie, and I wonder if that's partially why. I mean, I know it's at studio and everything like that, but it's obvious, for it to be how he wanted it, it's like, you have to do a lot of things before you get like a big distribution. Like for critic stuff, but I could tell he probably didn't want to go with the bigger studios, probably.
Well, this movie doesn't have a big studio feel.
No, it doesn't.
It has the feel of someone who wants to make a smaller scale, because Godzilla, it doesn't really have like a lot of. There is a big scale destruction scene, and there is like a lot of the big special effects stuff, but the movie's sort of minimal. It just takes place mostly in this like little hut with this guy and this girl who's just trying to survive with this family that he ends up the baby that the girl has is not her baby. She grabbed her in the midst of all the air raids that destroy the environment around them. The guy doesn't know the girl, but they end up getting to know each other just because of all the destruction around them that took away their homes. This is a movie done by a guy who wants to make a simple story with a few characters that focus on what Godzilla is, and he is a result of our actions. He's a result of our destruction, of our warfare, and of course of our atomic bomb. And because that's what created Godzilla in the first place, was the atomic bomb.
Honestly, yes, that's right. That's what did create Godzilla, the atomic bomb. And going forward, I just wonder now, with the saying of atomic bomb, I just wonder, how many atomic bombs would it take to destroy Godzilla? I'm sure that atomic bomb would have to have something thrown into it, though. Kind of thing.
Well, if it created Godzilla, I don't know if it would destroy him.
No,
it would probably make him stronger.
Probably grow bigger too.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is with Godzilla, now, does he have a self-healing power? Do they?
It just shows kind of like where it's like the area he got hit. It's like the scar is still there, but then it just like grasps and fixes itself.
Yeah. Now, did he always have that power to self-heal, or was that just this movie? Because they introduced that thing. There's a sequence early on in the film where one of the guys is shooting at Godzilla with the 50 cal, and in Godzilla's mouth is a sea mine, and he blows the mine up, and it fucks up his mouth a little bit, but then his mouth comes back together like Wolverine. Did they have that kind of shit before? Because that was one thing where I'm like, I already know Godzilla is indestructible, but I don't know if he has that.
I really don't recall, but I think this one wanted to gear on to indestructible with that extent. Like, have the indestructible have meaning, kind of thing.
Yeah, because I think the meaning to it is that no matter how much destruction we cause, it's just going to be ongoing chaos and madness. And that's what war is. I mean, it was.
If you had someone even in this economy, even though we don't live in a world like this fiction, but if you were fighting with someone up like Godzilla in this economy, I'm sure we'd be out of everything at this point, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It would be like our economy can't afford to beat Godzilla. We just have to clear out. We just have to evacuate all his zones that we see him go to frequently. That's how it would be in this world, I think, even though it's never gonna happen. But
creating Godzilla, it was like what Isoroku Yamamoto said. When Japan attacked America, we woke a sleeping giant. And that's what happens when you attack someone. You wake that sleeping giant. It's not going to go away.
Oh no!
And we're
keep coming back.
And the idea of Godzilla is he keeps coming back. He's going to kill you. You're not going to find peace. You're not going to find a good living as long as it exists and as long as warfare exists. Because we live in a time now where nuclear war is just as possible as it was when we were living during the era of the Cold War. We could get striked, or we could strike someone else, and it's just a matter of one person pressing that button, and when they do, they create a Godzilla. And that's what Godzilla always is. It is our thirst for destruction, and this movie really gets that idea. It gets the idea through the main character, through the family that he has to raise, through everything that they lost. And yeah, I really loved what they did with this film. It finally got what Godzilla is about.
Yes. And honestly, this was quite an experience and very monumental. And I'm just going to say, thank you, Mike, for having me on this episode, and I really loved this experience. I felt we got to see a purely nostalgic Godzilla that we're going to remember for a long time.
I think this will be a Godzilla that will live high up in the shelf of the other Godzilla films. This is one that I would of course recommend, but also don't just see it for the boom boom slam slam. See it for what it's trying to say, because this is a movie that is about people who cheated death and who end up facing it head on, because we create nothing but that. It's not the most uplifting film, but then again, I don't think Godzilla's supposed to be.
No, not at all. It's not supposed to be uplifting at all, but it was one hell of an experience.
Yeah. Having said that, thanks, Tarek, for coming on. If you guys liked what you heard, or if you like Tarek's reviews, you can go to Movies with Tarek. The link to his website will be in the description below. If you liked what you listened to here, you can check out YPA reviews at YouTube, at Instagram, at TikTok, at Jesus Christ, all of them. SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
And we're looking
all at YPA reviews. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree.
And be sure to keep following Mike with YPA reviews, and we hope to keep doing more segments like this, especially now with busy award season. Man, we got a whole lot of shit to cover, but we love what we do despite the energy it takes.
We should. I just want to get into a thing about award season. It is insane. Yes. For anyone who doesn't know what awards season is like, it happens around October through December, and this is when everyone is vying for the top Oscar spots. And we end up getting just loads. It's kind of like bribing. Yes. Like Netflix sends us huge...
sometimes more than one of the same thing.
They send us huge things in the mail. They send us, there is a thing in the mail that I got that one year that had a bottle of wine in it with a shot glass.
I think I got.
And I think it was called. I think the movie was called Lost Daughter. It was directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it was about this lady who ends up leaving her daughter in the middle of her.
I love though.
In the middle, she leaves her daughter so she can have a better life for herself. In short.
And now you're reminding me now, because I remember last year I got that Glass Onion box set, which was awesome. But then Netflix, because I think Glass Onion kept getting
the box set without the movie inside of it.
Well, it's funny. The box set had the movie as well. Then I also got another screener, and I'm thinking, okay, stop. I feel like each critic group. Now I'm not judging or anything, but I love what we get in award season, but even at the same time, it's like, how many of the same things are we gonna get? How much are they gonna? It's almost like when you get the same thing, it's almost like being bribed to vote for that.
to sort of provide context, the mail gets loaded with DVDs of movies for us to watch, and then if there's not DVDs, there are emails that have the movies attached to them.
And then sometimes it's like, make an account, put in this code.
Yeah, well, we got
a few days to watch this.
We get about 100 movies then during.
Oh, I had to make a separate folder, I feel, for a lot of stuff now because it's too much.
Yeah. So we get 100 movies during this season, and to wrap this up on Godzilla, the reason I'm mentioning this is because Godzilla -1 isn't. It's not a U.S. film. So it's not really going to be considered a big blockbuster.
Kind of like how RRR didn't get much last year when it truly deserved stuff.
Exactly. A lot like how RRR
that movie was awesome.
That movie was like a Netflix sensation. It ended up getting a lot of public attention, but there weren't really screeners for it. And a screener, if you guys don't know what a screener is basically you get an email, they tell you to show up at a certain movie location at a certain time, a movie theater at a certain time, and you see the movie then.
Press promo, press for critics.
So this film, because it's not U.S. distributed, it's not really considered a big blockbuster like the other Godzilla. There's another Godzilla Kong film coming out, I think.
I'm sure I know we're gonna get.
And we're gonna get all the screening information for that. But I think that it's kind of resemplative of sort of, looking out for. This isn't a littler movie, but in a way, it is a smaller movie. And if you are looking for a Godzilla film or for something that is a fun 2 hours, but also a very heavy one. I think you'll get it with this film. But yeah, in the middle of awards season for critics, this one slips the radar, but we're glad we went out and checked it out.
Yes, it was nice, even though, yes, it was. I was with a crowd I'm not used to being with, given we're at our own press screenings all the time. But I felt it was nice for a change to be at a public screening, honestly, with audience. Felt like having a cinematic escape, both for coverage, but also for fun at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, go to Movies with Tarek if you want to check out Tarek's stuff, and if you want to check out my stuff on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. Go to YPA Reviews. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. And, yeah, watch out for Godzilla. We'll see you later.
Godzilla -1